The Matt's Movie Reviews channel is brought to you by 80s Tees. 80s Tees is an online retailer of licensed t-shirts and pop culture gear from your favorite movies, TV shows, cartoons, video games, comic books, and musicians. Celebrate your inner 80s nerd and click on the link in the show notes below to get the raddest retro t-shirts delivered to your door. Now, this has been really interesting. So, the awards season has pretty much, it's pretty much done. I think the only big ceremony we have left is the Oscars, which is done, I believe, on the 28th or 29th of March, so not that long to go. And so far, the front runner, I believe, for picture is The Power of the Dog, which is I think they call it like a meta western that's on Netflix at the moment, and its director Jane Campion, I think, is a shoo-in for the best director nod. And there are many reasons why Power of the Dog, I believe, will win best actor and best picture. Essentially, I think a movie like Power of the Dog really represents what the Academy are looking for now, of what they deem to be worthy as a best picture. And keep in mind, just because a movie wins an Oscar for the best picture doesn't necessarily make it so. I go as far to say that there's been more best pictures of the year that never won anything, let alone an Oscar. So that you take that with a grain of salt, if you will. Now, I've seen Power of the Dog. I liked it very much. But as I had my brother text me earlier this week. He hasn't seen it. He actually said the text saying, "Is The Power of the Dog any good?" And I said it's good, but I wouldn't call it best picture good. It's a great looking movie. The cast does great work, and Jane Campion does great work behind the scenes as well. But I don't even think it even cracked my top 20 of 2021, which, by the way, I still have to share. So I like the film. I just don't like it as much as I think a lot of people in the Academy and a lot of other critics do as well. One person who absolutely loathes the movie is actor Sam Elliott. So for those who don't know, Sam Elliott is essentially, I guess you could say, a character actor, but I think he's the best example of a prototype Western actor we've had over the last few generations. There was the generation of John Wayne and the generation of Clint Eastwood, and then the Westerns kind of went out of flavor. But whenever a Western has come around, Sam Elliott at times would be part of the cast, and he's often the best thing about the cast. He's currently taken part of a prequel series to the show Yellowstone. It's called 1883. I think it's like a limited series, so it would be like one season only. That's just showing on Paramount Plus. So while Sam Elliott has been out there doing press, he made some interesting comments in regards to The Power of the Dog. So he was on the Mark Maron podcast, and he was asked about that film, and this is essentially what he said. And apologies for the cursing here. Let's see. I looked at it when I was down there in Texas doing 1883, and what really brought it home to me the other day, there was a full-page ad in the LA Times. There was a review, not a review, but a clip, and it talked about the evisceration of the American myth. And I thought, what the fuck? What the fuck? This is the guy that's done Westerns forever. The evisceration of the American West, to make it look like, what are all those dancers that those guys in New York that wear bow ties and not much else? So remember them from back in the day. After Moran clarified that Elliott was referred to Chippendales dancers, Elliott continued to share his thoughts on the film. That's what all these fucking cowboys in that movie look like. They're all running around in chaps and no shirts. There's all these allusions to homosexuality throughout the movie. Okay, so he's talking about pretty much an essential plot in the film is that in spoilers in regards to The Power of the Dog moving forward now. But it's essential that I get to the crux of what Sam Elliott is talking about here. Essentially, what he's saying is that because one of the characters is a homosexual or a repressed homosexual, that's in the case of Benedict Cumberbatch's character, that it essentially what doesn't make it a Western or not good enough to be a Western, and he's kind of like his take on the movie. And then he also says later about Jane Campion, the director, She's a brilliant director, by the way. I love her work, her previous work. But what the hell does this woman from down there in New Zealand know about the American West? And why, in fact, does she shoot this movie in New Zealand and call it Montana and say this is the way it was? Now, again, I think Sam Elliott's going to talk him out of his ass here. I'm a big fan of the guy. I like his movies. I think the plain speaking kind of direction that he has is really refreshing, actually, compared to a lot of people who, especially during award season or when they're promoted a product, tend to do kind of political speak and a lot of this stuff. But the stuff he says doesn't make sense. Number one, in regards to the whole point of the film having homosexual themes in it, why should any genre of film not have that? If it's beneficial to the character, it's beneficial to the story. I do believe that The Power of the Dog is based on a book. Probably double check that. But if it's beneficial to the story and it's beneficial to the character, and then what difference does it make it again if it's in a Western? Does a Western have to go by only a certain series of tropes and that's it? Usually for myself, I actually find it refreshing when I watch a movie, a genre movie or associated with a genre, to kind of go steps outside of those tropes. Now and again, I like to watch a movie that like sticks to them. Like, for example, my favorite Western of the past year, of 2021, is this movie called Old Henry, stars Tim Blake Nelson. Fantastic movie. It was up to me, that will be the Western that's up for the awards, but it isn't. I'm just a lowly old film critic and YouTuber here in Sydney, Australia. That's a fantastic film. Anyone who hasn't seen Old Henry, by the way, I really recommend you check it out. But why should a movie that has allusions to homosexuality or have characters who are homosexual, why should that go out? Why should that affect the genre that it's in? Why should it not be allowed in any certain genres? I just don't buy that. I think it's just total bullshit. And then the other part I don't get either is, why is it that he's so upset that Jane Campion shot a Western outside of America? I guess that, Sam Elliott hasn't seen spaghetti westerns before. Spaghetti western meaning that directors like Sergio Leone directed some of the most classic, enduring, influential westerns of all time in Italy. And he pretended that was the old West. Those movie star Clint Eastwood, made him a superstar, brought the Western back, alive, kicking and screaming after, the whole kind of John Wayne era and such. It shouldn't make a difference where it's shot as well, as long as the setting itself and the landscape itself and the locations itself are used well by the production designer and the director and the cinematographer. Man, if it works for the movie, it works for the movie. It doesn't matter if it's shot there or not. That's what I think anyway. So this, it's really kind of a shame. And interestingly as well, Jane Campion actually did fire back. So as soon as this came out, this kind of like Sam Elliott's criticism to the film, which I think is just really just like, talking out of his ass. I really do. Of course, with Power of the Dog doing all the awards rounds and such, the cast, and the director are going to be asked about it. So Benedict Cumberbatch was really kind of like, look, I'm not gonna go into it, but only to say that it's kind of like befuddling criticism, which I believe so as well. Cody Smith-McPhee, Australian actor, terrific in the movie, by the way. I'm so glad to see him getting an Oscar nomination. I remember the first time I saw him in Romulus, My Father, I knew he was going to be a great actor then, and he's definitely proven to be so over the years. He's essentially like, I'm not going to give power to any of that negativity, which is good for him in regards to that too. And then you got Jane Campion. Now, Jane Campion, I think, is very much straightforward in regards to Sam Elliott's criticism. So she was on the Hollywood Reporter Scott Feinberg's Awards Chatter podcast, and she was asked about Sam Elliott's criticism, and her response was, it has to be said, I think he was being a bit of a bitch. That's how she spelled it out. Because, he's not a cowboy either. He's an actor. He grew up in Sacramento and was educated in Oregon. We're dealing in a fictional world. We're dealing in a mythic universe. The West is a myth. It doesn't exist. And there's a lot of room on that range to explore that myth. And this is just another version of it. And I actually do really stand by that response that she had. I do think that Sam Elliott is acting a bit whiny in regards to some type of purity that the Western should have. Now, I'm a fan of westerns. There's certain films I want to see in a western, but some of my favorite westerns were the movies that kind of went against the grain. I still think the assassination of Jesse James, fantastic movie. Unforgiven, what Clint Eastwood did there, another fantastic one. I mean, what was the other one that I didn't saw not that long ago? Oh, is drawing a blank. Anyway, but those are great films. And Power of the Dog, like I said, I don't believe it to be the best film of the past year by any means. And as I said, it isn't in our top 20 films, but it is a fine film. It's finely directed. It's great performances. It's great craft to it as well. Just because it's shot in New Zealand and just because the characters in it that are homosexual doesn't make it a bad Western. Might make it a different Western. It might make it a different cup of tea where people are Sam Elliott are concerned, but doesn't make it a bad Western, just makes it a different Western. And just like Jane Campion said, there's open range to explore. I think any genre should be open for people to explore. And oftentimes you'll find the best movies in a genre are the ones that really kind of, innovative. I truly believe that. And it reminds me, this isn't the first time that Sam Elliott's been talked out of his ass. He was in The Golden Compass, which was the first adaptation of Philip Pullman's book. And it was made, I think Chris Weitz directed it, but it was like back in 2007. It had Daniel Craig, it had Nicole Kidman, had a bunch of people in it. But anyway, the film didn't do well at the box office and it didn't do well with the critics. And I think it was really simple. Number one, I don't think enough people kind of knew of the material. It wasn't the books themselves. I don't think were as popular as say what Lord of the Rings was and what Chronicles of Narnia were either. So not many people really got into it. And number two, I think the material itself went straight so far away from the source material, especially in some of its themes, that a lot of the fans of the book, and a lot of the critics who probably knew of the book didn't find the watering down of its themes to be that appealing. And so it didn't get good reviews. But Sam Elliott didn't blame it at all on the filmmakers or anything else. He blamed it on the Catholic Church because in The Golden Compass, for people who don't know, the bad guys in it are called the Magisterium. And Philip Pullman, the author of these Golden Compass books, he is a very open militant atheist, and he's made it very clear that the Magisterium in the books represent the church. So from that, Sam Elliott came to the conclusion that the Catholic Church stopped the movies from getting sequels. Had nothing to do with box office, had nothing to do with people didn't like the film. It had to do with the big boogeymen in the Vatican doing it. Now, I don't know about you, but if the Catholic Church had that much pull, I think they would have stopped other films instead of The Golden Compass. Do you think Benedetta would have been out in cinemas this year, or Spotlight, or any other films that are really kind of critical of church teaching and such? I don't think so. I don't think they're really caring about what's happening to The Golden Compass. The truth be told, even the church had any pull, they didn't have to do anything because number one, no one was watching the film. Number two, no one liked it. And by the way, the books were adapted into a TV series for HBO, proved to be very popular there because they were more to what was on the page. People really liked it. So it didn't stop from people from, adapting it again. And so in regards to Sam Elliott and his criticisms in regards to The Power of the Dog, there is history that he talks out of his ass when, there's something doesn't go his way or something he doesn't like is out there. He tends to just go a little overboard on it. Not going to stop me from watching his movies. I think he's a fine actor for the way that he does his roles. I love watching his movies. I think he's got one of the coolest voices in Hollywood. He's kind of like an old school guy, and that's what I love about him. But you got to call out these things for what they are. And I think in the case of Sam Elliott's criticisms of The Power of the Dog, it's pure bullshit. Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.